Hello, Peter47890/Sirus here, and for today, we'll be looking over at a game that is situated on a genre that most gamers usually don't look at, and that genre is visual novels, a genre that people sometimes question if the genre itself belongs to video games, since there's not much interactivity in a traditional visual novel. And the visual novel we will be looking into today is Fate Stay Night. Saying that this visual novel is one of the more well-known products given out by Type Moon would be an understatement, seeing how not only is it well loved by fans who have read the visual novel, but it has also spawned sequels, prequels, spinoffs, and adaptations, with all these titles belonging to the Fate series. And we're going to look at the visual novel that officially started the series, so without any further delay, let's start this video as we discuss Fate Stay Night. Fate Stay Night is a visual novel that was developed by Type Moon as well as published by them for the PC release, while the PS2 and Vita version of the game, which is called Nua Relata, is published by Kadokawa Shoten. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't it kind of self-explanatory with how a visual novel plays like, since it's basically like playing a choose-your-own-adventure book type of gameplay, with you just picking choices as the game progresses, and picking the right ones will progress the story, and picking the wrong choices will get you a not-so-good ending. And yeah, that really doesn't need to get explained, even though I kinda already did, or even be looked at so closely, because the gameplay of a visual novel is usually pretty simple. But I think the structure of a visual novel can still be discussed in detail and see if that structure can work, or if it doesn't work. So, how is Fate Stay Night structured then? Well, like most visual novels, with you basically being able to progress the game by making choices during certain instances in the game, with there being 3 routes you can progress through by making certain choices, which are the Fate, Unlimited Bladeworks, and Heaven Feel route. But you can really only progress through the Fate route on your first playthrough, and on your second playthrough you will have access to Unlimited Bladeworks, and after you complete that route, you'll be able to go through Heaven's Feel. At least in the original PC release. In the case of Relata Nua, the routes are actually separate games, with you being able to gain access to each route by just choosing which game you want to start up. Though I would probably still recommend going through Fate first, Unlimited Bladeworks next, and then Heaven's Feel, as I feel you will get the full experience that way. But there's still one important factor that I have to discuss in terms of talking about making choices in the game, which is basically the affinity system. Now, like I said before, the visual novel do have certain choices you have to make that either progress the story or get you or killed. Though not all choices during certain impasses are all life and death choices. Anyway, the choice that progresses the story can also give affinity points to certain characters in the visual novel, which are Saber, Rin, and Sakura. Oh, and one more character too, though saying who's that 4th character might be a bit spoilery. Depending on how much affinity you got will determine if you're able to get different endings or even progress the story itself. Yep, you heard that right. The affinity system can determine if you can progress the story or get a bad ending. Overall, I think the structure works well. The fact that you have to play through the Fate route first, Unlimited Bladeworks second, and then Heaven Feels last, I feel works well to the story and character's advantage in the original PC version. And the fact that you have the ability to skip through previously read entries on additional playthroughs does speed things up when you want to go to a point where the visual novel diverges to a different route, which does give ease of use, which is great for this type of game. The Relata Nua version is pretty much the same in this regard, as well as you being able to skip any scenes you saw in previous routes when moving on to another one, though you'll probably only be skipping the starting points only. Another important aspect to consider is if the game gives enough hints to avoid a bad ending if you do get one. I say the game does a good job of telling you what you did wrong when you do get a bad ending. with the Tiger Dojo segments, which does help comedy ingrain in them, which does make them really fun to watch. Now there's one problem I have with the Infinity system in Fate Stay Night, is that you have no way, or at least I don't think there is a way, to gauge how much affinity you got. So in the off chance you got a bad ending because you don't have enough affinity for certain characters, you might have to start over, which can be annoying. Now this isn't a problem if you're playing with a guide, but if you're playing it blind, this might be a problem. Now is this a huge problem? No. Even if you do get a bad ending because you don't have enough affinity with a character, I think the Tiger Dojo segments does explain what you have to do in order to build up better affinity for your next playthrough of the route.
なんだろう、思ったより静かなんですけど。まあ、こういう。
Now visually, the only thing we can really judge in Fate Stay Night, well, the visual novel, is probably its art design in regards to the character design, backgrounds, and actual anime cut-ins. Well, I guess we can also discuss the anime openings that appear during the starting points of the game. Now the various openings are both animated by Studio Dean and Ufotable, with the Ufotable openings being added in the Vita versions of Relata Nua, so you can really only see them if you play the Relata Nua versions, or the latest Relata Nua versions. Now the Studio Dean version is, well, decent. It's not amazing in terms of animation, but for what it is and taking into consideration when they animated them, I think they did a decent job, and I do think that the song accompanying the openings is really nice to listen to. Well, at least I think the anime openings are made by Studio Dean. I can't actually find the ones credited for the first few openings, and I'm just assuming since the visual style of the opening is really similar to what I saw in the Studio Dean version of Fate Stay Night. The Ufotable openings though are pretty much what you expect from Ufotable, which is to say they are absolutely amazing. And I do like they did animate an opening for Heaven's Field where Studio Dean didn't. Well, at least I don't think they did. I personally never got an opening when I played through Heaven's Field my first time through. Though then again, I do think that the Ufotable opening for Heaven's Field, even though it looks amazing, is really spoilery in some cases. Now for the character designs. I think they are rather pretty nice. Each character design are rather distinctive from each other, but the ones I think that have the best character design though got to be the servers. They're simply great character designs. My favorite one just got to be Sabers, with just how elegant it is. Now, not every one character design hit it out of the park, but overall I still think the character designs are rather pretty nice in the visual novel. As for the backgrounds, I think they're detailed and look rather nice. The various anime stills are also well drawn and does get you into the various scenes they are used in as you read through the story and does get you more immersed into the visual novel. As for the sound design, I think the sound effects they use in the visual novel are very effective in getting you more into the story, and the music is also pretty well done. Albeit you do hear the same type of music from time to time, but I think the music itself is rather pretty good when the soundtrack is being dramatic, suspenseful, or the situation is trying to be grand. There's really a lot of tracks that I dig in the soundtrack, such as Church on the Hill, Disillusion, and especially the Emaya theme. That track is just awesome. Now let's get to the voice acting. Well, the voice actors are the same people you hear voicing the Japanese dub of pretty much everything Fate series regarding these characters. Sugiyami Noriki voicing Shiro, Kawasume Ayako voicing Saber, Suwape Junichi voicing Archer, Ueda Kana voicing Rin, and the likes. And got to give the voice actors some props for consistency in regards to them voicing these characters and everything Fate related. Well, at least everything that has voice acting. I mean, just compared to the English dub of Fate Stay Night and Fate Zero, we got like 3 voice actresses for Saber. Now as for the quality of the voice acting, I don't know. I do not know Japanese, so I can't possibly judge if the voice acting is good or not. So there you go. But I do have to admit that the voice acting did get me more immersed into the game as I read through the visual novel, so I do think that voice acting helped in that regard. Just don't ask me to judge the quality of the voice acting since I don't know a lick of Japanese. And now we get to the most important part of a visual novel, namely the story and characters. Now, Fate Stay Night, like I said before, got 3 different routes, with each route containing a different story that revolves around the same characters and premise, most notably how each route got a different heroine, how each route also got a different tone and atmosphere to them, and of course the plot itself is dramatically different. But before we discuss the different routes, let's look at the unique premise that Fate Stay Night has. Anyway, the premise of the visual novel basically revolves around the Holy Grail War, basically a battle that will determine who will have the right to obtain the Holy Grail, a relic that supposedly is able to grant any wish to the winner of the Holy Grail War. And the battles are waged between 7 mages, who are called Masters, who each summon servants, which are spirits of heroes that span across all ages, to participate in the Holy Grail War. And each servant being summoned to participate in the Holy Grail War are put in particular classes, which are Saber, Archer, Lancer, Rider, Caster, Assassin, and Berserker, with each class having their own characteristics in the context of the Holy Grail War. And the visual novel basically put us in the shoes of Shiro Emiya, an idealistic, hardworking high school student, and shall we also say inexperienced magic user as well, who gets swept up by the Holy Grail War, who accidentally summons Saber, who rescues Shiro from a life and death situation from one of the servants who attacked him. And so begins Shiro's journey to try to survive the Holy Grail War as he tries to be true to his ideals. Right off the bat, I have to say that the premise of the visual novel is really interesting. I mean, a battle royale as a setting itself is pretty cool already, but add in spirits of past heroes in the mix and see how these different type of heroes from across all history will wage battle with each other, and you just got an awesome setting to hook people in. There's just a lot of interesting matchups you can do from past heroic figures with this setting. It's just really interesting. And the execution of the concept in the visual novel is fantastic, as displayed with numerous servants that participate in the Holy Grail War, from the backstory to the personalities to the fighting prowess and abilities. It's just marvelously done. Anyway, now let's discuss the first of the 3 story routes. The first story route I'm probably going to be discussed is
と、あなたが私のマスターか。
マスター?
Now the Fate route is probably what most people describe as introductory route. It's right where most of the characters of the visual novel gets introduced. Not all of them, but a good amount of them. You also get a good feel on what the personalities of most of the characters are, well, the characters that does get introduced, with most of the characters being also interesting characters in this route as well. You also got a good feel on the type of world that the visual novel displays, with how detailed the writing in the visual novel could be as far as how magic works, the intricacies behind magic, how the Holy Grail War functions, and you even get a good idea on how the individual areas of Yuki City are connected together as you are reading through the visual novel. And right off the bat, I proudly said that the visual novel is very detailed, not only in terms of the world building, but also with the characters, in terms of their abilities, their philosophies, giving you insight of what made them who they are, their motivations, and etc. And I think that is a strong point of the visual novel, as it makes the characters really interesting to see, as you see the depth the character has in the visual novel. Albeit not everything is revealed in this particular route, but it will eventually in the other two routes. Plot wise, I say the Fate route is rather good in this department. Why I do think the plot of the Fate route isn't as good as other two routes, and it also doesn't use the Battle Royale concept as well as other two, but as I said, it does a good job of introducing the audience to the world of Fate Stay Night, with the world being really interesting. It has nice character building between Shiro and Saber, as we see what drives these individuals, which is also really interesting. The slow moments in terms of the everyday school moments, or even when they're eating dinner, are nice, as interactions done between the characters are entertaining, humorous, and does get us to like the various characters in the visual novel, and the fight scenes are done well. The fight scenes being tense and suspenseful with how they're written, in terms of feeling that one mistake could end a match between the servants right there and now, which is really engaging. The fight scenes are also really interesting to read, as you see the various tactics that not only the different servants are using against each other, but also the various masters, and see the logic and progression behind each fight. This route also focuses on Shiro and Saber as characters and their relationship. More specifically, this route let us see the glimpse of Shiro's ideals, about his ideals about what being a superhero entails in terms of helping the people around him and his pursuit of it. But we also see how broken Shiro is, in terms of why he is so devoted to his ideal that he is, to the point where he pretty much disregards his own safety in the pursuit of his ideals in the visual novel. And in terms of Saber, we see despite being the proud, knightly and regal figure that she is a broken individual as well in regards to her past as a hero and how it drives her now and what her wish for the Holy Grail is. And those aspects of Shiro and Saber make them very interesting and relatable characters to get behind in the Fate route, and those aspects make their interaction and relationship to be interesting to go through.
I am the bone of my soul. Steel is my body, and fire is my blood. I have created over 1,000 blades, unknown to death and unknown to life. Have withstood pain to create many weapons. Yet those hands will never hold anything. So as I pray, unlimited Bladeworks.
And now we get to the unlimited Bladeworks route, which can be seen as the most action-packed route of the visual novel, and probably does expand a lot of what we know from the Fate route in terms of world building, as well as really expanding a lot on the various masters and servants that appear in this route. This particular route also focuses on Shiro, Rin, and Archer in terms of protagonists. The Unlimited Bladeworks right off the bat does a fantastic job with the Battle Royale concept, with how you see the various servants and masters maneuver in the Holy Grail War. And as a result, there's a good amount of well executed twists in this route that will really keep you on your toes as you read through the Unlimited Bladeworks route, as well as highlighting the various personalities and motivations of certain masters and servants who are made even more interesting in this route when comparing to the Fate route. Well, the servants and masters that does get the spotlight in this route. The different fights that occur between the servants and masters is also done extremely well, with there being some kick-ass and memorable fight scenes that happens. They're suspenseful, tense, grand, and just pure awesome. The interaction in the slice of life moments are memorable and fun, which does have nice character moments, which does get us invested in the characters. The relationship between Shiro and Rin is also done extremely well, even though the relationship itself is more typical in comparison to Shiro and Saber relationship, but I say the chemistry between Shiro and Rin is just fantastic, with the interaction between each other just being a pleasure to witness, from Rin teasing Shiro whenever chance she gets, to her getting caught off guard by Shiro's interactions, to the slow and touching moments that they have with each other. I do really like the chemistry between the two. Ren herself is also a great character. Ren is basically the confident and cunning tsundere character in the visual novel, but the tsundere part is done extremely well, as we do see why she would have those awkward tsundere moments when she displays them from her uprising as a mage, as well as practically living alone for the past 10 years. And it's aspects like those that does make her interesting, in terms of seeing what her overall motivation is, as well as seeing what she does in the visual novel. But I think the character that probably shines the brightest in Unlimited Bladeworks is probably Archer. This is the route that reveals a good amount about Archer, about his past in regards to how he became a heroic spirit, about why he is as pessimistic as he is, why Shiro ideals piss him off as much as it does, and that reveal also brings about a confrontation of ideals between Archer and Shiro. Well, I guess it's more accurate to say that the clash of ideals is much more focused on Unlimited Bladeworks, since in the Fate route, you can see that there is some tension between Archer and Shiro in regards to their way of thinking. And the clash of ideals between Archer and Shiro is done extremely well, as we see more in detail why Shiro pursues the ideals of a superhero that he has envisioned, even though that ideal is impossible to achieve in the real world. But we can also see why such an idea frustrates Archer as much as it does, as we learn more about him, and it is understandable why he would think that way as we learn more about Archer and what he went through. The clash of ideas between Archer and Shiro really does flesh them out as characters that really does make them interesting and overall great characters to witness, which does make us really invested in the confrontation, as their ideals and how to form them are fascinating and even relatable and inspiring, as well as the two characters being endearing characters.
おかしいな。どうして何してんだろう、私。
And now we get to the last route of the visual novel, and that is Heaven's Feel. Oh man, this route. Let's just say that Heaven's Feel is probably the most unique route in the visual novel. It's probably the darkest route, as well as expand a lot about the Holy Grail, which fans of Fate Zero will probably appreciate, since this route will eventually explain why things happen like they did at the end of Fate Zero. Well, at least the anime. It also focuses on Sakura, the shy and timid underclassman of Shiro, and this route reveals more about her character as well as the Mato family. I would probably say that Heaven's Feel is the most intense route in the visual novel. One factor that I attribute to this is the route's atmosphere. Heaven's Feel just have this thick atmosphere of dread, horror, and suspense that is really reminiscent of Tsukihime, another visual novel by Type Moon that was also written by Kinko Nasu, which is simply fantastic. You really do feel the harshness, fear, and suspense that this route gives off, with there being a lot of build-up and mystery throughout the route, and with just how dark, brutal, and even depressing this route can be, which really does make you invested to see how things will progress for Shiro and company, and to also see what's going to happen next in the story. The tone of the route also does transfer well to the fight scenes. You really do feel how brutal the fights can be in this route. The other route got that feeling to them too, and they do it extremely well, but it's really pronounced here, which in turn makes for some really intense battles for you to get sucked into when you do read them. And that harshness is not only applied to the physical events of this route, but also the psychological, in terms of how you see the events of this route affect the characters, which in turn create for some very fascinating character drama that are very emotionally charged. One such example, and a pretty big example, is that we see just how much Shiro ideals are pushed in this route, and see the inner turmoil that he experiences in deciding what's the right thing to do, and dealing with the aftermath of what his choice is. Witnessing Sakura's character is another example, as she is a very dynamic character as you see her struggle, where that struggle takes her throughout the visual novel, see how that struggle came to be, and its eventual conclusion. But there's not only darkness in this route, as there are some really nice character moments and interaction in this route as well, from the lighthearted slice of life moments to the slow and dramatic scenes that build up character atmosphere to make us care for them and the struggles that they face. I particularly really like Ilya and Shiro's interaction in this route, and not to mention, this route probably got one of the funniest scenes in the visual novels I've seen that made me laugh pretty hard for a minute.
Kuka!
It's just that awesome. But that one character I think that just shined the best is Kotomine. He is at his absolute best in this route. He's just such a fascinating character. From trying to understand his motivations for doing what he does, to trying to understand the psychology of his character, as well as saying as badass things he does in the route. This is just an excellently well done character, and probably one of the best characters in the visual novel. And I'm just gonna say it right now, Kotomine in Heaven's Feel is even better than he was in Fate Zero. So yeah. And overall, I would say that essentially, Heaven's Feel basically take what we know about Fate Stay Night and basically turn it on its head, and it does it in a very interesting way. And overall, the story, characters, and overall world in Fate Stay Night are fascinating and interesting. But there are some flaws to the visual novel I have to highlight, because there are some. Now, I believe most people who have played/read through the visual novel can probably already guess what one of the main problems to the visual novel is. The cooking scenes. Now, I don't have a problem with the slice of life moments in Fate Stay Night. They are nice and fun moments that let us see nice character interaction that make us more invested in the characters. But the cooking scenes are a whole other matter. And this is mostly because they seem like filler. Not all of them, but a good amount of them. Or most of them. And detailed filler at that, with us seeing how the food is prepared, what type of food are they making, and etc. And the cooking scenes can slow down the pacing of the visual novel somewhat, and aren't interesting to read through. Another problem in the visual novel is the sex scenes. Now, I don't have a problem with sex scenes by themselves, as long as it's done right. It's not done right in Fate Stay Night. Well, at least in the Fate and Unlimited Bladeworks route, as it feels like they put in the sex scenes just for the sake of having a sex scene. As the reason for the sex scenes in the visual novel, well, for the Fate route and Unlimited Bladeworks route, basically they just feel like it's a plot device, rather than serving character relationships. Now, I think it's handled much better in Heaven's Feel, though the point still stands that the sex scenes in Fate and Unlimited Bladeworks feels very forced. Now, those are the main big problems of the visual novel, though they're not big problems in the grand scheme of things, though there are some precautions you have to take into consideration before starting the visual novel. Firstly, this is a pretty long visual novel. I mean pretty long. This took me about 100 hours to read through the visual novel. That's pretty long. Overall, I can see why Fate Stay Night is as popular as it is. It got great characters, great story, and it does got a premise and mythos that does open up to telling all kind of different and interesting stories. The writing overall in Fate Stay Night is fantastic, and though it does have some shortcomings such as the cooking scenes, how some of the sex scenes in Fate Stay Night is kind of forced, namely in the Fate and Unlimited Bladeworks route, I'd still say I did really enjoy my time reading through Fate Stay Night. Now again, I probably wouldn't recommend Fate Stay Night to every gamer, since the gameplay is very simplistic to the point where some gamers might be turned off. But if you're looking for a great story, great characters, and a fascinating premise and world, then I would recommend you give Fate Stay Night a try.